The Maiden of the Forest by pumpkinmoose22, Chapter 2. The next morning Kit woke to the sun filtering through his windows from the balcony. Letting out a sigh, he leisurely stretched before climbing out of bed. Walking over to the windows, he pushed them open and stepped out onto the balcony. His loose white shirt was open, allowing the slight morning breeze to flow freely across his chest. Kit leaned across the balcony and stared out over the magnificent grounds, the gardens so tenderly cared for, open to his view. It used to be his mother's most prized possession, and once he and his father had done all they can to make sure the garden received the same loving care it had when she was alive. Kit still remembered all the times he and Captain Alistair would get lost in a game of hide-and-seek. There was a particular section of the garden he had discovered, when he was having a rather rough day, that had become his favourite place to be alone. Kit became lost in memory as he thought of it. He had been 16 at the time and had miserably failed in an examination concerning judgment. His instructors had placed a difficult scenario at his feet, where a servant had seduced their master and stolen their welfare. Kit had decided to let the servant go after returning what was stolen without further punishment, but the instructors said he should have done was have the servant be dismissed and restricted from ever serving in higher nobility again. He had felt like a complete failure, because his parents just happened to be sitting in on that lesson that day. Mortified over his error, Kit had run out of the palace to seek refuge in the gardens. As several garden servants chased after him, Kit ran into an open hallway, the walls on either side made of tall hedges. Looking back and forth, he discovered a door covered mostly in vines. Hearing the heavy footfalls of the guards, Kit rushed forwards and hastily searched for the handle. Finding one, he shoved his shoulder into the wood and stumbled a little as it gave way with a loud creak. Kit immediately closed the door behind him and prayed the noise hadn't alerted his pursuers as he leaned against it. He looked around and sucked in a surprised breath. He was in an enclosed space, the floor blanketed with a warm patch of evergreen grass. The walls were made of stone, but over the years nature had caused vines to climb over the rocky surface. Large overgrown bushes of wild pink roses lined the walls. A broken wooden swing, one of the ropes had snapped on the right side, hung from a large tree whose branches and leaves gave the enclosed space a natural ceiling. The forgotten garden was broken down, untended, but completely enchanting. Over the years, Kit had made it his secret project not only to restore the garden, but tend it regularly. It was his favourite secret hobby, and no one, not even Captain Alistair, knew of it. The latter knew that Kit had a place he retreated to somewhere in the gardens, but he recognised the need not to pry. Every man needed his privacy, even a prince. Kit retracted from his memories as the noises of Lance and Henry entering his private chambers reached his ears. "Your Highness!" Lance called. "I'm out here," Kit called over his shoulder. Lance and Henry appeared. "Are you well, sir?" Henry asked, concerned. Kit smiled kindly. "I am fine, thank you. How are you both?" "Well, Your Highness," Lance replied. "Would you like us to draw your bath?" "Please." "What would you like to wear today, sire?" Henry asked, while Lance went to give the order of the other servants to bring up hot water for the prince. "The black waistcoat, red jacket with the silver cording, and white breeches will do," Kit answered. "Very good, sire," Henry said as he rushed to the closet to get the required clothes. Kit turned his attentions back to the gardens. Today just happened to be his day of reprieve, and he had a fairly good idea of how he was going to spend it. The city was going to be thriving with excitement over the announcement concerning the ball, and Kit didn't want to be anywhere near the gossip and conversation that would follow the news. No, it would be best to avoid the local streets today. Looking across the grounds past the town, his eyes caught hold of the woods, and an idea began to form. "Your bath is ready, Highness," Lance called from inside. Kit ran a hand through his hair, his decision made. A pleased smile lifted his lips as he withdrew from the balcony. Bathing behind a curtain, he conversed pleasantly with Henry and Lance, who were busily wandering around his room, making his bed and preparing his wardrobe. "What are your plans today, sire?" Henry asked several minutes later. Kit, now clean, stepped out of the tub and dried himself off. "I plan to fence at some point, but first I think I'm going to take a walk in the gardens." He pulled on the white breeches and undershirt Henry had draped over him over a chair, before coming out from behind the curtain. Lance helped him into his black waistcoat while Henry fetched the red jacket with silver cording from the now-made bed. Once completely dressed, boots and all, Kit set Henry to ask Captain Alistair to join him on a bout of fencing after lunch before leaving for the gardens. The bright blue sky, decorated with slight wisps of puffy white clouds, hung above, small patches of sunshine cheerfully lighting the world around him. Kit took a deep, satisfied breath as he wandered down the path leading to the deep part of the gardens. His feet knew exactly where to take him, so Kit was able to dwell solely on his thoughts as his body routinely wove its way into the hedges. He reached his secret garden in minutes. He left the door covered in vines for the sake of selfish privacy. Pushing it open, he glanced left and right before entering the enclosed space. A feeling of bliss coursed through his bones as he looked around. Years ago he had replaced the swing, switching out the old ropes and rotted wood for the finest materials he could find. He had a vast amount of pleasure being able to climb the tree and expertly tie the swing to its securest branch. His father would have never allowed him to do such a reckless thing on his own. Smiling to himself, Kit picked up one of the garden tools he kept next to the door and walked over to a bush of roses in full bloom. "Hello there," he muttered, lightly touching one. "You've bloomed well, my friends. But now I must apologize for what I'm about to do. But I can assure you, it is for the most noble of purposes. For what injustice it is I harbour your beauty all to myself, when I can share you with another." Selecting an arrangement of partially bloomed flowers, he snipped away at their stems, being mindful of the sharp thorns. Once he'd gathered enough roses to make a lovely bouquet, Kit returned his shears and took one last look at his lovely garden and left. Normally, he would have known it was strange for him to be seen with such a large bouquet, but his thoughts weren't entirely clear, since they were once more occupied with the maiden he had met yesterday. Walking back into the palace, he didn't notice the curious stares of the guards and servants, nor their quiet mutterings. Stepping into his study, Kit delicately set the roses on a chair before pulling out a clean, heavy piece of parchment. He made sure to choose one that didn't hold any attachment of the royal family. He didn't want his mystery girl to learn of his true parentage from a letter. Dipping his quill into the bottle of bright black ink, he paused for a moment before beginning to write. "To the enchanting Lady of the Woods. It would be an honour to me if you would be so kind as to attend the King's ball 3 days hence from now. As a gentleman, I promise to dance with you should you find you are able to attend. With the most sincere regards, Mr. Kit." Kit read over his notes several times before nodding to himself in satisfaction. After allowing the letter to dry, he folded it before putting it into an envelope. He was in the process of melting the sealing wax to indent it with the royal seal when he remembered to whom this letter was written. Chuckling to himself, he set the wax off to the side and merely folded the flap of the letter inside itself. Yes, that could pass as a letter from a mere apprentice, surely. Gathering the letter and bouquet, Kit had to keep himself from skipping as he travelled down through the palace, down to the stables. His dazzling smile charmed every servant he passed, and each one couldn't help but notice the flowers and note he carried delicately in his hands. Though Kit was not aware, by the time he had reached the stables, more than half of the palace guard and staff gossiped as to what he could possibly be up to. "Your Royal Highness!" Julia, one of the servants in charge of the horses, curtsied before him. For a moment she was aware of his presence. "Hello, Julia," Kit said with a large grin. "How do the horses fare this morning?" "Most of them are very well, Your Majesty," she replied, eyeing the bouquet in his hands but deciding not to comment. "Glimmer is very far along in her pregnancy. I personally believe we will have a new life in the stables any day now." "Oh, really?" Kit asked, interested, as he looked to where Glimmer, his mother's old horse, stood in her stall. "She definitely looked as Julia said. Let me know when that happens," Kit encouraged. "I'd love to be there when it does." "Oh, Your Highness, I'm not sure it is proper for you to see such things," Julia muttered. "Why would you say that?" Kit asked curiously. "Is it not beneath you to see over the birth of the animals?" Kit smiled kindly at her. Julia was still fairly new to the palace, which is why she had been perplexed by his interest in Glimmer's current state. "I assure you it is not," he said gently. "Such miracles are worth seeing, don't you think?" Julia, surprised but happy the prince felt this way, nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I do, sire." Just then Eric, Kit's personal stable boy, appeared. A little winded. Apologies, Your Highness, he breathed. I was caring for Victor and unaware of your arrival just moments ago. It's all quite all right, Eric, Kit assured. How is my father's horse? He's as stubborn as Tiberius. Kit laughed, but not as stubborn as Boreas, surely. Insulting my horse again, Your Highness. Kit whirled around to see Captain Alistair standing at the stable entrance. Well, you are the only one besides Julia who has ever managed to tame the beast, Kit said with a grin. It takes talent, sire. Kit chuckled with a small inclination of his head to Julia, who blushed. Shall I ready Tiberius for you, Highness? Eric asked. Please, Kit answered before turning back to the captain. And what, pray tell, are you doing here at this fine hour, Captain? I would ask the same of you, Your Highness. He returned, staring pointedly at the roses in Kit's hand. I fancied a ride. Kit vaguely replied. To what destination? The captain probed. Kit sighed, knowing he was caught. I desire to go to the woods. Sire, you cannot expect me to allow you to travel there alone. Kit blinked. You are not going to try to stop me? Captain Alistair rolled his eyes. We both know that would be quite pointless. Kit smirked. Indeed. Well, I suppose I can do with a little company. I have already notified the guard, Captain Alistair revealed. Kit frowned. Why is every move of mine to be watched? The prince would be foolish to travel anywhere at this time without some form of escort. Captain Alistair gently scolded. And why is that? Kit muttered as he wandered out of the stables to wait for Eric to return with Tiberius. Captain Alistair followed in his wake. The news of this ball is already spreading like wildfire throughout the borders of the kingdom. Surely you don't want to get caught in the woods by a group of rapturous women. One of them in particular I wouldn't mind, Kit muttered under his breath. Captain Alistair heard him, however, and chuckled. That is under the assumption that she fits into that category, sire. Why would she not be interested in me? Kit challenged. She agreed that she would like to see me again. Perhaps she was being nice. Kit stared. You're teasing me. Captain Alistair laughed out loud. But of course, Your Highness. Kit shook his head. Insufferable, he muttered just as Eric appeared, leading Tiberius by the reins. Passing the bouquet to Captain Alistair, Kit mounted the beast after patting its neck affectionately. How long am I to wait for the guard? He asked, slightly disdained as the bouquet was handed back to him. There will be only 3 of them, besides myself, Your Highness, Captain Alistair replied with a small grin. He enjoyed seeing Kit's discomfort sometimes. They should be arriving any minute. Very well, Kit sighed. 10 minutes later, Kit rode Tiberius towards the west gate, away from most of the people's prying eyes. The west gate was less populated by the general public, for it was the gate mostly used by the servants. Carts for all kinds of things, ranging from food to materials, passed in and out of the gate, checked by several guardsmen before being permitted inside. Even from a distance, Kit could see the servants unloading several cartfuls of food and drink, while others transported laundry and fine materials such as parchment and ink. The activities in the area ceased altogether as Kit's presence was known. Prudence, the royal housekeeper, immediately approached them. Your Highness, she said with a deep curtsy, what brings you to the west gate this morning? Kit genuinely liked Prudence, despite her fierce, no-nonsense personality. Though she had a tough outer shell, her heart was in the right place. She also lived up to her namesake, ensuring the palace was run with precision and accuracy at all times. A woman in her early 40s, Prudence had aged rather well. She had a sharply upturned nose, grey-green eyes that reminded Kit of a little of a hawk. Her brown hair was always in a bun, and her black and grey gown gave the impression of a constant shadow following you around, making sure you were always on your best behaviour. As a child, Kit had been completely petrified of her, but when she saved him at the age of 6 from drowning in the palace fountains, he had warmed to her. Kit set her a genuine smile. Good morning, Prudence. I'm sorry if my presence puts you a little behind schedule. You most certainly are, but I am sure you have a good reason for doing so. Prudence replied without a hint of worry. She had spoken boldly to the prince his entire life, and that certainly wasn't going to change now. Kit actually liked that Prudence had a backbone. Her strong will always caused him a sense of amusement. Chuckling, he replied, I am afraid I will be in need of using the west gate today to depart. I assume that is because of the stir among the people concerning the announcement of the conditions of the ball. Prudence replied with a hint of annoyance. Kit grinned. You disapprove. It wasn't a question. You know that I do. Prudence replied petulantly. The palace is separated from the commoners for a reason, your highness. Kit raised an amused eyebrow. Perhaps it would do well to sway from certain traditions. Prudence. Some traditions are meant to remain, no matter what changes may take place over time, your majesty. Oh, come, Prudence. Why not relax and allow the people to have the benefit of attending the ball in good spirits? I'm afraid that until you give me an absolutely sound reason why I should change my mind, I fear I must stick with my resolve that commoners do not belong in the palace. Now, if you'll excuse me, your highness, I have matters to attend to. And with that, Prudence turned on her heel and marched away. The servants who had stopped to listen leapt out of their skins and immediately began to move at the sight of the royal housekeeper coming towards them. Kit shared an amused look with Captain Alistair before spurring Tiberius towards the west gate. You know, I fear that there are many that agree with Prudence, Kit, Captain Alistair said as soon as they left the local streets behind and were surrounded by wildflowers, tall grass, and countless butterflies. The two of them rode 12 feet ahead of the guard under Kit's orders. He desired a free conversation with the captain every once in a while, where both of them were able to speak their minds without being heard. Alistair, what are your thoughts concerning the ball? Kit wondered when he directed Tiberius off the beaten path into the tall grass. Personally, Kit, I think it is quite a grand idea that you desire to do something for the people such as this. He answered, It is not often they are allowed into the grounds of the palace, let alone inside for mere pleasure. True, Kit muttered. I think when I am king, I will hold balls and other events such as this more frequently. I want my people to see I consider them equals, Alistair, not mere subjects who bend to my every whim. A wise king you will one day be, Kit, like your father. Kit smiled. I fear I will never be as wise as he, but thank you for thinking so highly of me, my friend. After a few minutes of silent riding, Captain Alistair finally decided to ask about the bouquet. What do you intend to do with the flowers, Kit? Kit smiled and stared down at the fine roses. I plan, Captain, to leave them in the woods. Captain Alistair raised an eyebrow. You do not seriously expect that maiden of yours to magically find them, surely? It's all I have to go on, Alistair, Kit said in slight frustration. What exactly happened between the two of you yesterday? Kit glanced at his companion before leaning back in the saddle to stare up at the sky. A faraway look slightly glossed his eyes, and his voice took on a gentle tone as he relayed the conversation and his thoughts concerning the girl he met. She was positively charming, Alistair, he finished. I've never felt so... He sighed, unable to think about the right word. She sounds enchanting, Captain Alistair commented, intrigued to meet the girl who had so thoroughly captured his best friend's heart. Most assuredly, Kit agreed, looking round the trees. We must be close. Is that not the spot? Captain Alistair asked, pointing to the opening in the woods on the other side of the thicket they were standing in. I recognise the fallen tree I stopped next to when you was finishing your little encounter. That's it, Kit replied happily, recognising it as well. He noticed that the grass leading up to it was slightly beaten down, as if to make an unofficial path. His suspicions that his mystery girl used this route more than once grew from his observation. Wait here, he said to the captain. I shall only be a moment. Captain Alistair raised his hand for the guard behind them to halt while Kit gently nudged Tiberius forward the wood. Kit's heart was pumping harder in his chest as he drew near. The image of his mysterious fair-haired beauty seemed burned into his retinas by the time he reached the location where he had first met her. Pulling on the reins, he guided Tiberius to a stop. Dismounting, he looked around. Where could he place the bouquet? Where was the most likely place she would see it? He didn't want to set it in the middle of the path, but he also didn't want her to ride past it out of ignorance. His eyes roamed over the scene until he came upon a tree with a hollow opening. Wandering over to it, he peered inside and to find it empty. Surely she would notice a bouquet of pink roses pointing out of a tree. Making up his mind, Kit placed the flowers delicately inside and slipped the letter in between the stems. Taking a few steps back, he surveyed his work. Tiberius nickered behind him. Kit turned around. You think it's a stupid notion, don't you? The horse just looked at him. Kit frowned. Well, I'm not changing my mind about it. If she finds it, she finds it. And if she doesn't, well, I'll just have to hope she will attend the ball based on the general invitation. He walked over and patted Tiberius on the nose. I want to marry for love, Tiberius. He sighed, staring at his steed's dark eyes. I fear my heart is stolen away by an enchantress of these very woods. I pray she finds my sentiments pleasing. Come, let us return to the palace before the day runs away from us. As he rode away, he did notice the faint sparkle of blue shooting from what appeared to be a branch belonging to the gnarled old tree. Ella's thoughts raced as she guided Galahad, her spotted steed, back to the manor. By royal command, the ball where the prince would choose a bride was open for the people. What marvellous news! Ella thought nothing of the prince, but of the fascinating Mr. Kit whom she had met in the woods just yesterday. When she had gone into town that morning, the last thing she had expected to hear was such a rousing announcement. The possibility of meeting Mr. Kit at the ball was much more plausible than in the fantasies she had supposed of all last night when she had lay before the dying embers of the fire. "Oh, Galahad, isn't it wonderful?" she cried as she tightly filled the basket filled with supplies she had purchased while in the city. "The ball is open to all maidens in the land. I can meet Mr. Kit once more. You remember him, don't you, from yesterday?" Her horse simply continued trotting through the thicket down their usual path. Ella giggled to herself as she remembered just how taken she had been by the handsome apprentice. He had been so wonderfully kind and courteous to her. It had been a long time since she had received such gentle attention from someone. "I want to see him again," she sighed. But a horrible thought struck her. What if he was just saying those things simply because he was a gentleman? Does he truly want to see me, just as I want to see him? She had unknowingly reached the exact same spot she and Mr. Kit had met. A sudden gust of wind slammed into her, ruffling her hair all about, despite the fact it was held back away from her face. While brushing the loose golden locks out of her eyes, Ella noticed something pink against the dark bark of a tree beside her. The wind died down, and she was able to see that the pink object which had caught her attention was nothing other than a large bouquet of some of the most beautiful roses she had ever seen. In a daze, she hopped off of Galahad, set her basket off to the side, and gingerly approached the trunk of the tree. How positively curious! She muttered to no one in particular. Unsure whether or not she should remove the flowers, she decided to lower her nose to the magnificent blooms and inhale their rich scent. She sighed pleasantly. That's when she noticed the letter. Her curiosity doubled to which it was before. Ella couldn't help but reach and pluck the letter from between amidst the thorns. Swallowing hard, she figured it would be all right to read the letter at least. That way she would know whom the flowers were intended for. A gasp of pleasure escaped her as she read. "To the enchanting lady of the wood. It would be an honour to me if you would be so kind as to attend the prince's ball in 3 days hence from now. As a gentleman, I promise to dance to you if you should find that you are able to attend. With the most sincere regards, Mr. Kit." A large smile graced Ella's face, while warmth spread from her heart down to her fingertips. Her hands trembled slightly. She reached forward and carefully removed the roses from the tree's hollow trunk. A giggle escaped her again as she smelt the blooms. He had come back and left this for her! She never would have found it had it not been for that curious gust of wind. Thanking the higher powers above, Ella span around, holding the roses close with one hand and the letter with the other. "I must go to the ball," she sighed, racing over to Galahad. "I have to see him again and thank him for this charming notion." Stooping down, she picked up the basket of supplies, placed the roses delicately on top of everything else before mounting Galahad. Glancing one more time at the tree, and then the flowers and the letter, Ella's elation grew, excitement claiming her. She spurred her horse forward. She couldn't wait to tell the others about the ball. As she left, the old tree had produced a sparkle of blue from the prince's earlier department, had let out a soft chuckle, but if anyone heard, it was simply mistaken as the wind. End of chapter 2. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. That's absolutely gorgeous. This story is a bit more light-hearted for the most part. It does get a bit serious later though. I love the idea of Kit and Ella communicating using the tree in their little clearing where they met. It really adds to the relation between the two. I just find this couple so well done. It is one of the best examples of love at first sight I have ever seen. And trust me, I have watched over 100 versions of Cinderella, possibly over 200. It's just my favourite fairy tale. Anyway, remember to like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!